Hello and welcome back to the My Wrong Opinion podcast. My name is Damon Bennett. I'm your host for today. There's nobody with me. It's just me, solo dolo out here. So I'm just looking to bring some information and talk about a little bit of a topic. So as I said in some previous pods and on my Twitter, I'm trying to change the format a little bit. There will be a general news section, but there won't be as much focus on the news. It's going to be more so about my opinions on certain things. And there's a particular topic today that I'm going to be talking about regarding an event that recently happened in Bethel, Ohio. Now, for those of you who aren't aware, I am a Midwesterner. I live in the state of Ohio. I've lived here my entire life. I've also lived in small town Ohio my entire life as well, for the most part. I've kind of bounced around here and there from big city to little city, so on and so forth. Went from like the Reynoldsburg area all the way out to Tuscarawas County. So I read the story, I think it was like a week and a half or so back, maybe a little bit longer than that, about the experience that they had with their Black Lives Matter protest. And it kind of led me to have a few thoughts about my experience in the town that I grew up in. And kind of led me to create this what I call small town syndrome, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But that's kind of going to be the main focus of the pod for today. That might actually be shorter. I don't know. Who sees? Who knows? It might actually be like only a half hour or something, but we don't know. But yeah, hope everything's okay out there. Hope you guys are staying safe. Hope you guys are social distancing, keeping yourself up to date on stuff that's been going on with the COVID news and everything of that nature. It is hot today. It wasn't as hot as it was a week ago, but it is hot today, and I was sweating out there for a little bit, but I'm good now. Yeah, that's all I got. So as far as that goes, we're going to go right into the general news for today. All right, so first up, Dan Snyder. So for you guys who aren't aware of Dan Snyder, who he is the current, and I say current purposefully, owner of the Washington Redskins, who has recently come out upon allegations of him being involved in some I wouldn't call it sex trafficking, but something close to it. There's a lot of sexual harassment allegations going on right now with both him and the former employees that worked for the Washington Redskins, who now are working on changing their name, actually, which is really cool. I'm looking forward to seeing that. That could be a topic in and of itself later on. But anyway, but yeah, he recently just came out. Apparently, he was involved in something similar to the Jeffrey Epstein situation. I'm not too familiar with the Jeffrey Epstein stuff. I just know that it involved a lot of sexual exploitation and a lot of manipulation from a person in a position of power. So I believe it was speculated that Dan Snyder is involved in those similar things. There was stuff recently coming out about or allegations about how he, if you were a particular season, I don't know if you were a season ticket or whatever, but if you bought a specific kind of ticket, I guess, it gave you the opportunity to basically have sex with some of the Washington Redskin cheerleaders or something like that. And like they were doing like shady stuff, like selling their own personal tickets out and stuff. And there's a whole bunch of other weird stuff. But yeah, they got involved with that. They're in a lot of heat right now. They've been in heat for a while, but this has not helped their organization whatsoever. And Dan came out recently saying how he is now more impassioned than ever to make sure that this type of culture doesn't stand in his organization. Basically, he's on the cleanup crew and he's cleaning up hard. So, God bless him, but it's not looking good for the boy. It's not looking good for the boy. And it's believable, too, especially with what's been going on lately. I wouldn't be surprised if he was involved in that, him and his people that were with it. Actually, no, we'll get to that later. Although you guys already saw it. Next up, God of High School. So this is a recent anime that came out recently. It's a webtoon, which for those of you guys who aren't aware of what webtoons are, they're basically the Korean version of manga. And this is their Crunchyroll's specifically second webtoon adaptation. I only saw the first episode so far. The animation is pretty good. The fighting is pretty good. I'm noticing because like the Tower of God and God of High School, and I think recently came out that there's going to be another webtoon adaptation. I'm noticing that webtoons are starting to become adapted into anime, and it's getting some good traction. I know I watched the Tower of God. I loved it, and I was looking forward to the second season. Forget Rachel, by the way. Rachel's terrible. But this one's looking to be promising as well. Like I said, I only watched the first episode. I still gotta get caught up, but it's looking good. So if you have a Crunchyroll account, it's on there. If not, find a way to get to it, I guess. However you want. I'm not going to advocate for illegal downloading or illegal streaming or anything of that nature. I'm just saying do what you got to do. All right, so that's that. And then next up, so over the weekend, I believe, or very recently, Meg Thee Stallion and Tory Lanez were hanging out together, and Meg had evidently gotten shot. Tory ended up going to jail. He got arrested for legal possession of a firearm, and Meg Thee Stallion ended up in the hospital uh, being treated for gun wounds. Now, I still don't know the full details of the situation of the story, but evidently, I saw a couple of videos on Twitter where basically Meg came out of the car with her hands up, and the cops were, I don't know what they were doing, but they just had her constantly like moving around in different directions for some stupid reason, with blood dripping down her legs. By the way, it was a horrible look for the police. But she was okay. I believe she's still healing now. She might be still in the hospital. She might have gotten out, but Tory's side of the story hasn't come out yet. Meg really hasn't said whether or not. There's now speculation that Tory had shot her, which I mean, there could be any number of reasons why that could be the case. If it's true, which I'm doubting it is, and if anything, it was probably a accidental discharge. But either way, it's an interesting situation. And like I said, there's not much information that I have on it as of right now. All I know is that Tory was arrested, Meg was shot, she's fine, and we're waiting to hear more as it goes. But yeah, those are some interesting things I came across over the course of the past week or so, and I just wanted to share that with y'all. So that's it for general news. Now we're moving on to the topic at hand. So, as you guys are aware of or not aware of, there was a Black Lives Matter protest out there in Bethel, Ohio. For those who are aware of Bethel, Ohio, it's a really small town in Ohio. It's a really small town in Ohio. Not a big population. Not a lot of diversity. You guys can kind of get the track of where I'm going here. And there's someone who organized a protest out there, a Black Lives Matter protest. Now, there was some backlash, some heavy backlash, and it got newsworthy because of the counter protest response. There was apparently a group on Facebook called the I think it was called the Bethel, excuse my language, the Bethel bitching group or something like that, which was interesting. Uh, and basically, there was a guy on there that was talking about how Black Lives Matter is coming. They're starting a protest. They're going to bring a whole bunch of some Antifa people over, and Antifa, I'm just still not familiar too much with Antifa, but apparently Antifa is like they're speculating that the Antifa people are going to sneak in with the Black Lives Matter people and start looting, robbing, and doing all this other crazy stuff. So we're not going to let this happen here. We're not going to let this happen on our territory. We are taking a stand. And sure enough, as the protest began, there was a lot of people out there, mostly bikers. Apparently, bikers for Trump was apparently their slogan, but they came out, and at first they were just kind of on the opposite end of the street, just kind of screaming, yelling, blah, blah, blah. But then eventually they started getting bold. Some of them started moving over towards the protesters. Some of them actually started getting physical with the protesters. There was a video on Twitter where a guy had pushed over a girl. I believe she was probably a teenager, something like that, a little girl. And there were a whole bunch of people yelling, "Get her the F out of here, F her, F this, blah, 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 blah." Like, and then a whole group of them started screaming, "All lives matter, all lives matter." And it was that type of a response. The people in the city were ashamed, obviously, of the way that their town was represented. There were a lot of people that came out and apologized later on. There were some people that were saying that the reason why they were so adamant about the counter protest was because they were trying to protect their city. Because they were under the belief that Bethel, Ohio is not a racist town, so they didn't understand why people in Bethel wanted to actually have a Black Lives Matter protest in the city. Because their thought was, if anything, you're just going to bring racist ideology into the city. Their whole mentality is, we want to protect our city. We want to keep our city away from the things that we're seeing in the media. We don't want them to be involved in what they believe to be damaging rhetoric or whatever you want to call it. What ended up happening as a result of them protecting their city was them basically being violent to people as a result of that. And was initially, and still was during the time, a peaceful protest. As far as I saw, nobody had sparked up. Nobody decided to throw a brick in anything. It was pretty peaceful, and the people in the city just started going ham on these people. And it reminds me, now I'm from a small town in Ohio as well. Uh, the nearby town that I was next to had a protest. Now, thankfully, it was pretty tame. Although a similar situation happened, there was somebody from my area on Facebook, of course it's Facebook, that came out saying that I hope, like, y'all better not block the street, otherwise I'm gonna run you over. If there is a person that wants to feel like they can loot around my spot, my shotgun's ready for them. Just all this hyper aggressive, just ridiculous state, just chest beating stuff, and it was off putting for sure. But thankfully, nobody did anything. No, there was no Bethel moment in there, but it did lead me to think about like my experience because the article that I read even was talking about how like there's a lot there were very like very little minorities in the town, and everybody there in the city that was white was like, there's no racism here. We love people of all colors and nations. We don't discriminate, blah, 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 blah. Why would anybody feel uncomfortable being here? But then there were certain testimonies from people who were the minorities that were like, actually, no, no, no. I was exposed to some pretty racial stuff during my time there, and I couldn't wait to get out. And the people in the city were also saying like, well, of course people get out and they want to badmouth our city and say that our city's racist, blah 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 blah. But we don't believe that. We don't stand on that. We stand against it, and but so on and so forth. What I find interesting, and this is why I want to talk about small town syndrome. There's a there's kind of like this. It's hard to put into words. When I say small town syndrome, it's coming from a place of, again, my experience and some of my observations. Um, the main one being that your frame of reference, more often than not, is only the town in which you grew up in. And what I mean by that is your personal hand in hand experience growing up, living up, and being around it. More people that live in these small towns typically tend to stay in these hometowns. It's just, everybody knows everybody type of deal. Generational down the line, people move in, they stay there, build families, build up houses, give houses to their kids, stuff like that. People in those towns very rarely are well traveled, meaning that they don't really get out of their city too much, except for maybe to go to a particular vacation spot or something like that. And then on top of that, there's little to no exposure or personal interaction with people of differing cultures. So really, you're just, and it's mostly white. It's usually just white people talking to white people about any little thing, and everybody knows everybody's business, so on and so forth. What it creates, and that's just kind of a theory. What it tends to create though, when your frame of reference is only the town in which you live in, it can create a situation where you start projecting your small town experience into the world as a whole and onto other people as well. And what I mean by that is it creates like this bubble, basically, a bubble mentality where a town like Bethel, Ohio can't possibly see their city being racist because there's nobody to be racist towards. So, of course, they could see and view themselves as being open minded and so on and so forth. When in their personal experience, they'd never had the they had never had the challenge of having to relate to somebody of a differing race. And usually, when it is, it's it's isolating. And what I mean by that is like as a minority who grew up in a small town, I've had the experience of feeling isolated. Didn't really have many friends, didn't really have too many people to hang out with. Partially because of my own actions. I mean, I really there was just some stupid stuff I did in high school. But another part of it was just I didn't really like certain people that I was around. Most not really because of who they were per se, but because of the things that they were saying. And I started noticing really early on that my blackness, and I'm a biracial individual, but my blackness was often put on trial at times. And I would have experiences where I'd be talking to certain people and they would be saying like, yeah, you're not even really black or like that for real. And I was like, what? These are white people telling me this, by the way. I'm like, what are you talking about? It was like, yeah, you don't act like, you don't sound like, you sound articulate, you sound intelligent. Basically what they're doing without their realizing it is that they're attributing intelligence, well-spokenness, self-respect, all these other things to what they consider to be whiteness, whereas blackness is as they say, like, you're not, hey, yo, what's up, homie, blah, 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 the stereotypical understandings of what they know to be the black experience. And then they experience a type of, and it creates, like I said, for me, it created an experience of isolation. And then not even just that, it wasn't just that, just general ignorance of like, oh, you don't like fried chicken, what's wrong with you? I've had people say that to me in those towns as well. Like, whoa, you don't like fried chicken and watermelon? What's your problem? It was just, it was crazy. It was crazy. It was like they were forcing me to be a token, and I just wasn't rocking with that. And then I've had people even just flat out just say the N word, say it to my face, say it around me with no problems. The rap song comes out, the N word comes out, and they're all saying it proudly and boldly. And I'm just like, it made me very uncomfortable. And I've had conversations with them on numerous occasions about it, and the response was always, "Well, you guys say it all the time, so what's the problem? It's just a word, blah 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 blah." And I try to explain to them the reasoning behind it, the history of it, so on and so forth, and they just like, "Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but no, I'm still gonna do it." And so um, that it led me to a point where I was like, "Man, I can't wait to get out of this place." Like the very second I graduated, I got out of there as quick and as fast as I could, and I know for a fact that I wasn't the only one. And I know even more so, like when I hear the stories about some of the minority folk in Bethel, Ohio, how they couldn't wait to get out. I understand that because growing up in that type of environment, it really does make you feel like you're alone. And irregardless, I have white friends, I have people that I can hang out with, but I mean, at the same time, like there was always that stigma. There was always that social, not even pressure. There was a social pressure to try and act and operate in a stereotypical way, but there was also that feeling of like, yeah, you're not really, you're not really from here. Like it's that type of feeling. Now nobody would ever say explicitly, and there were some well-meaning people in the town that I grew up in. I'm not going to say that everybody was an explicit racist. It was just more so that they didn't know or didn't understand how to interact with someone who was of a different culture than themselves. And there wasn't much of an attempt to try and relate. It was more so of a pressure to assimilate, because in small town syndrome, you want to keep your small town protected. You want to keep the culture that's been there for years protected. You want to keep the way of life as it is. There's not really much of a desire for change in these types of cities. There's not much of a desire for you. I can't call it progress, but there's not much of a desire to grow or expand. It's more so we want to stay as we are. It's complacency, and sometimes it's contentment. Like there's people there that genuinely have no desires to want to do anything beyond what they're doing. There are genuine humble people in those towns that really don't want to do much apart from just, hey, work at the farm, work at my dad's spot, make some money, and just live my life as is. And that's a virtuous thing. But at the same time, it creates this idea of like, no, we got to protect, we got to protect, we got to defend. And that's where you hear and see these people on Facebook or different types of social media platforms that when the threat of having their ideology challenged comes with the kind of beat your chest, stick your flag in the sand, and with a gun, with a shotgun in hand, saying, "I dare you to cross over here." It's like that type of bravado that comes about, usually from the men, sometimes from the women. But it's like this strong desire, like, this is our town, this is our city, we're going to protect this. And it comes as a result of like what we saw in Bethel, Ohio. Some people can take that and turn it really left, and it ends up getting and looking bad. And what they were trying to protect, their attempts to appear to not be racist and to protect their what they thought was good ideology in their town, ended up becoming a display of the racial tensions that they have underneath them that they never explored. And then that's what manifests it breeds from this confusion when you as a white person are crossing boundaries that you never realized you were crossing, and you had freedom to commit these taboos at will with no consequence. And so when someone like Black Lives Matter comes up and starts talking about Black Lives Matter, your immediate response is confusion, like, why are you bringing that here? For one reason, because there's really no black people here, but then secondly, like, we're not racist. What are you talking about? How could we be racist? We don't do da 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 da. We don't da 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 da. But again, even in my experience, you being around only you gives you the freedom to interact however you choose. You don't have any cultural boundaries to cross. So you don't have any restraint. You have the freedom to say the N-word because there's nobody around who's going to get offended by that. And if there's any person that's white that is offended by that, you're like, you're an idiot. You're not even black. It's like that type of stuff. And on top of that, there's no consequence for it. Because even though I was a black individual in that school, and trust me, I wanted to throw hands with a lot of people in that school. A lot of people in that school, dog. There's so many times. But you're one black person against hundreds. And at a certain level, you got to realize, much like I did, I'm only going to be here for 2 more years. Just grit your teeth and bear it. And the very second you get out, get out. And that's what most minorities tend to do. You either do one of 2 choices. You either leave, or you just accept it as the way things are, and you just kind of live with it. And sometimes even, unfortunately, you start adopting it and then start becoming your own enemy in a regard. And you start speaking out against your culture in negative ways and start saying really charged, racially challenging stuff in support of a racist ideology that, in order to protect yourself, you adopted so that you didn't find yourself isolated, at odds, and alone. And I firmly believe that's how you end up with people like Candace Owens, the Hodge twins, other people like that, to where at a certain point they had to accept and identify with the ideology that they grew up around, because otherwise it was either that or basically social death. It was that or you were going to be alone fighting on an island. And I chose to fight on that island for a long time. But then after a certain while, I just kind of, you know what? F it. When's the next... when is graduation so I can get out of here? That was my mentality. And it started almost as early as my sophomore year of high school. I only lived there for maybe 5-6 years. But in my short time being there, I was like, yeah, I'm good. I'm good. I'm so good on all of this. Like, I made a couple of good friends. I got to meet some pretty good people. But for the most part, no. And even in that, it wasn't even to say that I was completely alone. Like, there were people even in administrative roles that was out there helping support. I wouldn't have gotten into college. Like, there was a guidance counselor there to this day who meant a lot to me. And she sought out colleges, applied to different people on my behalf, and helped me actually get into the college that I was at, that helped me get the degree that I have, that helped me get the career that I have. And she means a lot to me. Wherever you are, if you happen to cross this, I do appreciate you. And that gesture that you brought forth, she even paid, I'm pretty sure she even paid for some of my application fees. And I was just like, wow. And you find that sometimes in even small towns like that. You find those moments where there are people that, irregardless of the culture around them, they see and they want to invest in positive ways. And even now with these Black Lives Matter protests, there are people in those towns that are fighting the good fight. And it's a beautiful thing. And sometimes, and in some cases, it's even more challenging because you're facing people that you've known your entire life, and they're calling you out your name, saying this, saying that. In a city where everybody knows everybody, and everybody's a friend to everybody, it's easy to be alone. It's easy to be alone. And so that's what small town syndrome can do. That's what it can do. And the confusion from having those boundaries being challenged is it can turn into frustration and a feeling of infringement upon your rights, because now you feel like you're playing the victim and the hero at the same time, where you're fighting for a right that no one took from you. And when people start saying things like you can't say, or when you say that it's this, it's like, why are you infringing upon my constitutional right to say whatever I want to say? And that is where we start facing that hero victim role, where they'll often play themselves off as, I've never been racist, I've had black friends, I've interacted with black people, blah, 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 blah. You can't say that about me. And trying to say that is an infringement upon my rights, saying that I can't. And those same people will get mad when you tell them they can't say the N-word, because it's like, what do you mean I can't say the N-word? And it's like, there's such an adamant fight for that, because there's a right that you feel like you deserve, and you want that right. And it's further emboldened by the fact that everybody in your town, for the most part, agrees with you. Like, there's political debate, of course, but I'm talking more so in line with racial interaction, cultural things. Everybody in your town, for the most part, agrees with you, because most of the people in town are white. So white people just agree with white people on white things, even how they view black people, because your only real interaction with black people is through the media. And I'm going to get to that later, but it's everybody in town agrees with you. So the challenge on your belief or your perspective rarely happens. That's why, like, even in small town Ohio, it's mostly white Christians, and everybody that agrees with everybody because everybody's a white Christian. There's not really a challenge on the belief. There's not really a challenge to their perspective, really. And it rarely happens, especially when it comes to things like race, because that, or racial issues or cultural differences. It very rarely happens because there's not too much opportunity for it to happen. And this can at times create a boldness to express yourself in a way that would be largely challenged if not shut down in certain environments. Like I know for a fact, a well-known fact, that half the people, not even half, all of the people in my hometown that felt emboldened to use the N-word would never have used it if they lived in Akron, if they grew up in Canton, specifically South Canton, if they grew up in Cleveland, East Cleveland, 50-50 Kinsman, all them spots, they would not be so bold to do that. If they grew up in Richmond, Virginia, areas like that, where there is a predominant African American presence, very rarely would you see people be willing to do that. And if they did, they would be willing to fight because there would be people, black and white, that would completely oppose that because they see the clear racism in that statement, in that ideology. But in small town Ohio, you don't have that challenge, so it doesn't happen to you. And it makes you bold. But cultural exposure, especially at a certain age, can create a certain sensitivity to communication. It can lend yourself to more restraint as a result. But when you grow up in a small town where nobody is of a different color than you, different ideology than you, and everybody thinks the same, you're never going to be challenged in that regard. You're never going to feel the need to restrain yourself because there's no feelings you have to protect because there's nobody around you to defend. So you'll naturally continue to express yourself in these ways. And when you start getting around people that start holding up those boundaries and saying, whoa, you can't come over here, it's like, what are you talking about? I've been crossing these boundaries my entire life. Why are you telling me now that I can't do that? You're infringing upon my right as an American. You're telling me I'm not this. You're telling me I'm not that. And again, the victim role plays a part. The hero role plays a part. At the same time, the paradox begins. You're infringing upon my right to cross and insult you because I have the right to do so, even though I have no frame of reference for that interaction. And yeah. And like I said before, your main exposure to other cultures is mainly through media, social or otherwise. And rarely are these experiences positive. Very, very, very rarely. And it creates your point of reference for how cultures, quote unquote, should behave. Typical stereotypes like the dot on the Indian's head, the starving children in Africa, everyone in Africa being starving and poor, that misconception, the idea of acting black, and by acting black being your pants are sagging, you're drinking a 40, you're smoking, whatever. It's like because you'd never seen or been around people of different cultures, and your only frame of reference is being what is shown to you through certain medias, you believe that that's how everybody is. And it's easy to create that. And I see that even in my interactions with black folk, or even with certain white people from small towns, is that they'll present certain black folk and try to say that these people are the ones that hold the truth. And in reality, they are not. Black people are not a monolith. And I'm learning that term even myself, is that you can't take one person and make everybody that one person. You can't do it with white people either. You can't do it with white people. It's just that this is a phenomenon that happens mostly in white towns. And I'm speaking more so for the people that operate in these ways, because it's this ideology, it's this central belief that my town is my city and I want to protect it. And it's like, you don't, the fear to change, the fear to exposure to something new, the fear of having something that you've believed in for so long potentially being wrong, is something that most people that grow up in those environments don't want to face. They don't want to face that, black or white. Honestly, you can put that in any culture. If you grow up around what you grew up and you're not around much, you want to protect that, especially if you value it for what it is. And for you to have grown up your entire life believing one thing and to have somebody random come around and say, actually, that's wrong, your natural response is going to be aggression. It's going to be aggression or aversion or some form of both. But you're not going to want to fully engage that, regardless of how open-minded you perceive yourself to be, because you've known small-town Ohio your entire life. You've known small-town period your entire life. You've known that, and you've seen the value in it. You've seen the virtue in it. You've seen the good in it. You've experienced it for yourself. There's no way that this can be based in that racist ideology. There's no way that I can be racist. There's no way that my town can be racist. There's no way that's possible. Because I've just seen nothing but good people working hard and making an honest living their entire lives. I've never seen them be racist. And again, their idea of racism, again, is based off of media perception. It's the It is the burning of crosses on flags. The burning of crosses on lawns. It's the white hoods. It's the riding on horseback, and it's the lynching of black folk. Even though that still happens, it's that extremism where it's like, I'm not out there killing black people and like shooting up and destroying black homes, so there's no way that I can be racist. But they ignore the fact that their ignorance towards other cultures, their unwillingness to understand, their gross overgeneralization of an entire people, their false perceptions of what those people are, the aversion to a differing culture, the natural isolation that you create, the space that you tend to put the minority groups in your town in, just through interactions, just through the lack of communication. And most people tend to be people tend to be typically friendly to them, especially in schools. But that's more of like in a way of like, ooh, it's like looking in a zoo, looking at a specimen. It's like you're more enthralled in the fact that they're different, but you don't know them for the person, you know them for their race. And that's what makes it weird. That's what makes it strange. That's what makes it isolating. Because then you talk to people and you're like, if you're not operating in my stereotypical framework for what your people are, then you're not that. You can't be that, because that's all that I've known. I've known black people to simply just be this particular way. There's no way you're black, or at least you don't act black. That's typical the stigma. And it's the same thing if it was Hispanic. It's the same thing if it was Asian or Eastern Oriental. It'd be that same way. You don't act this way because you don't act black, and it's a white. It's the authority they think they have to determine what is black, what is Asian, what is Hispanic, what is Latino, what is Oriental, what is Asian. You know what I mean? It's the building up of the esteem that's been supported so much by people that think, act, and behave in similar ways to you, that gives you the boldness to then declare with authority what a certain race is or isn't. And that in and of itself is a form of racism, whether they want to accept that or not, whether they believe that or not. That's what racism can stem from. It's sometimes can be stemmed simply from ignorance and the fact that you're not around much to know what is or what isn't racist. And the lack of humility you have to accept the fact that the way you might be interacting with different cultures is wrong. The way that you may have thought is wrong. The way that you might have perceived the world or the people in it is wrong. That's a hard thing to accept. That's why white privilege and that statement is so damaging. It's so offensive to most white folk, because some of them grew up in small towns where they were dirt poor and they worked for everything that they got. And they never were exposed to what their privilege could mean for them. And it creates a feeling where it's almost like it's wrong to be white. And that's one of the first times that their racial identity is pushed back against them, because for the most part, white people don't have to worry about being white. You grow up, you're in a country that is 60% something you. Some of you guys grow up in towns where you've never seen a black person a day in your life, except on TV. So you don't have to worry about being white. You don't have to worry about what your whiteness looks like or how it interacts with people of different culture, because you don't grow up thinking I'm a white man. You grow up thinking I'm a man. That's it. I'm just a man. Like, even when a person of different color comes into your town or community, you're like, that's a black man, but you don't say to yourself, I'm a white man. You don't identify as a white man because you never had to. You don't identify as white because you never had to. Like, you have to put it on your application, sure, but you never really have been challenged on what it means to be white. You never had that challenge. You never had a reason to. So it makes sense. But it's just it's that type of skewing of perspective that lends people to feeling like any type of differing ideology that they see as harmful is an affront to them. And they take an adamant stance against it because they want to protect what they know. They just want to protect what they know. And they want to stay in that bubble, and that bubble gets harder, it becomes more callous, to the point where any type of oppositional ideology or thought that comes into that space is immediately rejected and dismissed and like considered taboo. Much like in Bethel, Ohio, the people were talking like, don't bring this here. Don't bring this Black Lives Matter here. There's no reason to talk about that here. We don't want to hear it. We don't need to hear it. Why would you bring something that harmful into our environment? Do you see what I'm saying? The statement of Black Lives Matter and what it represents is harmful. to them. It's damaging to them. It is an infringement upon something they have fought so hard to keep safe and isolated from the rest of the world, that the very second the rest of the world tries to come in, it's like an invading army, and they got to do everything they can to stand their ground. And 300 make the case against the Persian army. You're not here, not us. We will fight back. It's that mentality. And it displayed itself clearly in Bethel, Ohio. And I'm sure there's plenty of other examples. I saw a Facebook video the other day, and I'm pretty sure it's the same city, where a young white girl, God bless her soul, was walking around with a Black Lives, just one white girl, just one, walking around with Black Lives Matter flag. She led her own protest by herself. And these grown men, walking up to her, threatening her, pushing her around, trying to take her flyer, trying to take her poster that she made. And this poor girl doing everything she can to try and still keep it pushing. And she's screaming against it. And there's people screaming out, all lives matter. Get out of here. What are you doing? You're creating dissension. You're creating disunity. You're hurting us. You're blah, 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 blah. And it's one little girl out there just trying to say, make a plain statement like Black Lives Matter, which is true. And there's so many people around her, grown men, literally grown men, walking up, pushing her around. And that's what I'm talking about. The boldness that you have to do that, because you know that your environment agrees with you. You know that your culture will support you. You know that your community will support you, because you guys have grown up with each other your entire lives. So there's no reason to fear. There's no reason to fear that. And even if the protest had maybe like 50, 60 people, you would still be emboldened to do that, because you know you have the numbers advantage. You know you have, at the end of the day, my community that will stand beside me. I have the police force that will stand beside me. I have the fire departments that will stand behind me. I have the mayor that will stand behind me. I have the school district that will stand behind me. I have all these people that will stand behind me. And it gives me the boldness to walk over across the city, push you down, and take your sign and rip it up in front of your face. And I know I made the right choice, because everybody in the neighborhood that saw it is cheering. They're cheering, honking their horns, wooting and whistling out the windows, because yes, you protected our city. And it's just raining a little white girl. God forbid she was black. God forbid if she was black. That probably would have been even worse. But God bless her, wherever she's at, and I hope she's okay. But even in Bethel, Ohio, you saw there was a dude punched a girl dead in the face or upside the head or something like that. Police officer saw it, didn't do anything about it, because he knows the guy that punched her in the face. And he's able to easily dismiss that act and be like, well, he's just angry. Let's just try and separate them, get them away from each other. Like, you'll see that. You'll see that natural defense, because that person could have been their brother. A brother that could have helped protect them when somebody was bullying them back in the day when they were young. That's what small town syndrome is. It's a community that creates a bubble from itself, from the rest of the world. They like it here. They like the way things are. They don't want it to change. They don't want difference. They don't want it. And in their minds, intellectually, they'll say, I'm open to different perspectives. I'm open to learning about different stuff. But it stays at arm's length. It doesn't get any closer. And when you try to bring it closer into your space, into this home, it's like an immune system. Everybody will crowd around that thing and do everything they can to either push it out or destroy it. I mean, you find I say small town syndrome, but you can find this even in certain communities. Even in certain African American communities, there can be that same thing. I remember even in the schools that a school that I worked at, there was a particular student I was interacting with and like mentoring. And I kind of proposed to him, like, hey, what do you think about the possibility of you moving out of the city? And you could see immediately like the anxiety build up in him and the fear of like something new. And it was like, no. Now keep in mind, the environment that he grew up in is extreme. It's damaging. It's a terrible place. Like, he's exposed to a lot of violent stuff, guns, drugs, all the other stuff. But that's all that he knows. He doesn't want to know different. It's the same thing here. It's just that the difference is, in a black community, even in the black community, you don't always necessarily have the community with you. Because the police force that comes into your community is still white. The mayor that probably runs your city is still white. The people at charge, the people that own the banks, the people that run the banks that take care of your house loan are white. Like there's even in that, there's no full support. But in a small town Ohio environment where it's mostly white people, you got your lawyers who are white, you got your police officers who are white, you got your fire department officials who are white, you got your mayor who is white, you got the bank owner who takes care of your home loan is white, you got all of these white white things protecting white people. It's whiteness on whiteness, and that's what helps create that feeling of security for you. Whereas in black communities, although the mentality is the same, it's a little bit different, only because there's not that much support there. It's just your family, your block, and that's pretty much it. But a white officer can go in there, kill somebody, and that's a wrap. It's like there's nothing to worry about. We like even in the black communities in there with that small town syndrome going on, they have to be aware of what's going on outside. They have to, because outside there, they come in here, there's no protection for us. Like they can just come in, come out however they please. They have to be aware of it to a certain extent. They have to, and they have no choice to, because that's the only way they can survive. They can't close down the walls and say no, not here, because the very second they try, it's going to get torn down. And not even by the people, by the system that they're within will tear it down. It's, yeah. And so it's just groupthink. It's common. Bubbles are formed. It's common. There's a brother of mine named Zach Mason who released a Facebook video a while back, and I will try and find the link and probably put it in the description. And he broke it down very well, and it's very similar to what I was talking about before. But he also has a video that came out that's very, very enlightening for some of y'all who may not fully understand what I'm talking about. And yeah, those are just kind of the thoughts that I have. It's in my observations, even being in small town Ohio, my life for the hours and years I've been in there. Yeah, you notice those things, you feel those things, and white people that have genuine, well-meaned, like they mean well. It's just that they don't understand. But it's not even really an attempt to try and understand. They want to understand only so far as they're comfortable with, and it doesn't go much further than that. And it creates, like I said, a natural opposition. And at times it can even turn into aggression. And in the worst case scenarios, it can turn violent. Where the people that you thought weren't being racist all of a sudden are saying a whole bunch of racist stuff. Like, I'll come out and kill you, I'll hang you up on a tree, I'll murder you and your family, tear you up, tear you down. Even against white people that disagree with their ideology. It's the same thing. Even if you're a white person and you're saying Black Lives Matter, that opposition will still be coming your way. Sometimes it'll come your way because you're infringing upon what we've established, and sometimes that hatred is a little bit more aggressive towards you because it's like, you're supposed to be with us. Like, I can see it from the black person, but you're supposed to be on our side. So what are you doing? And it creates that unfortunate experience. But yeah, that's what I mean by small town syndrome, STS. And it's real, and then most of America is this. It's small town syndrome. It's small town Ohio, all over the country. People have the misconception that America is LA and America is New York and America is Dallas, Texas, and it's Miami, Florida. It's not. It's not. Ohio, like Bethel, Ohio is America. Bethel, Ohio is America. Somewhere in Montana, some random city in Montana. That's America. Most of the country is that. It's not Cleveland. It's not New York. It's not DC. That's not the rest of the world. They just have more influence. They just have more exposure. But most of this country is in fact small town Ohio. So yeah, those are just kind of my thoughts. So even with that, with most of the country thinking the way the small town people think, there's no surprise why we have some of the stuff that we have now. And George Floyd and all the stuff that's been happening with him has exposed the truth that a lot of people had, up until that point, no reason to really think about or face because they never had to be presented with it. Most people that grow up in small town Ohio don't have to deal with racial issues because there's nobody in their town that's different than them. They can speculate from a safe distance, look away and afar, and look from a bird's eye view and say, well, yeah, obviously that's wrong. But little do you know that secretly, deep down in your heart, in the underbelly of the society that you've grown up in, the community that you're around, there is a subtle racial ideology that is beginning to form and is solidifying and is becoming more concrete the older and older you get, and it's more validated by the negative images you see in media, the negative perceptions that you see presented to you on social media, the people that are talking in negative and derogatory ways about the people that you thought weren't as bad. The comparison of cultures, the comparison of cities, the comparison of towns and experiences, and thinking that, wow, why are all these black people suffering and dealing with stuff? Like, but you look around, much like the guy in the Zach Mason said, but you look around and you see nothing but white people, and it's like, oh, that must be the difference. Like, white people just somewhere inherently in them have the ability to handle things better than black people can, or people of different cultures can. Like, you can look at a movie like Roots and be like, yeah, it's horrible that we used to treat black people like that. There's no, like, you would never say, oh, I completely support that, unless you're a troll. You'd never say you support racism. Like, you would never say that out loud. But you don't understand underneath you is, I've known white, I've been white, I've experienced and seen white my entire life. My way of living has to be the right way to live. There's no way it can't be. Because all I've seen and experienced is this way of life coming out well for me. And maybe if the rest of the world thought the way that I think, we wouldn't be in this situation. If the rest of the world had taken up the mantle like I had taken up for my city, put their flag in the ground and said, not here, maybe they wouldn't be going through some of the stuff that they're going through. And it's easy to say because you don't have to. You're not challenged on that. And very rarely will you be, apart from social media. And it's real easy to engage in social media when you know you can click that app off, go back into your living room, and it's just white on white all over again. Like, your home is safe. Your hometown is not. Like, no, there are no stakes. So you're free to engage however you feel free to engage, and believe however you're free to believe, because you don't have you don't have a diversity of thought in your community that lends itself to giving you the ability to think critically about things, even about how you think, in an objective way. And let's be fair, bias is a natural part of human experience. We're all biased. We're all biased. Every single one of everybody in the world is biased. There's no way to avoid that. But being aware of your bias, accepting your bias, and trying to do something about your bias is a completely different thing. And that's and again, that's like people that grow up in metropolitan areas and environments who are exposed to multiple and different cultures they are used to their ideas being challenged. They're used to their ideologies being kind of mixed and twisted. Not mixed and twisted, but kind of being shaped and molded by differing perspectives. It's normal for that. But even in that, it's possible to find your bubble, find that hole, and keep yourself locked in and create your own little community and really don't look outside and see anything different. It's easy to do. It's not just small town people that do it. It's just easier to do it in small towns than it is in bigger cities. But you still find it. Of course you still find it. But even then, you're still creating a small town in a big city. And it's possible. So yeah, those are kind of my thoughts. And obviously, you guys feel free, disagree, agree, whatever you think. Feel free to comment below. Follow me on Twitter. I'll be posting a lot of newsworthy stuff on there as much as I can, along with other things like memes and funny stuff like that. You'll be finding me often at times having comments and certain stuff. If you're looking for more news things, I'm going to try and focus on putting it more so on my Twitter account there. Like, comment, subscribe Subscribe to the channel. I'll be keeping these things coming out weekly as much as I can. And keep an eye out for my Periscope, because I'll do what I've been calling side stories, where I'll just have like a random little small topic. It might be a little theological thing, something that I read from the Bible, or something I found on social media, or something that I just want to have some quick comments on that won't be as long format as my pods typically tend to be. And so, yeah, just keep an eye out for all that stuff. I'm going to try and make sure I keep bringing this content out to y'all. Apart from that, if you agree, great. If you don't, great. Feel free to engage. Feel free to reach out and see what type of conversation we can have. I'm always open to that. You guys take care. Have a good day. See y'all later. Peace.